Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be explaining how to set up custom authentication system in your Next.js application from scratch. And basically we're going to be calling a Node.js project. So in previous videos on this channel, I've taken time to explain how to set up Node.js backend that is JWT based, makes use of access and refresh tokens. 2FA is set up, forgot password, refresh. So yeah, we're able to like set up all this route for you to be able to implement sign up, login, logout. You can refresh your access token, and then we have 2FA set up. You can verify 2FA, login, disable 2FA, and all of this here. We're going to be making use of this route in our Next.js project. And now, this video is important for set of people who don't want to make use of Auth.js library, who don't want to make use of Supabase. These are libraries that already makes it very easy for you to implement authentication in your project, especially in your Next.js project. Or you don't want to make use of utility functions like those provided by BetterAuth and the likes like that, right? And you just want to set up authentication from scratch in your project. Maybe you have a backend API like what I just showed you and makes use of JWT and co, and then you don't want to make use of utility functions like BetterAuth, right? So you may want to like set up authentication from scratch in your project. And yeah, this kind of video would be really helpful. So in this case, the flow is a user logs in, and then there is an access token and a refresh token. Now, the access token is stored in memory. So you may want to store the access token in, say, local storage, right? But you may not want to do that also. But yeah, the access token is short-lived, right? Because it's just like 15 minutes, while the refresh token could be like something like 7 days. And then now, if you store it in local storage, it could be exposed to cross-site scripting and all like that. But yeah, you could store it in memory, say in like context and state across your project, and can be accessed. Maybe you're using React context, or you're using Redux or co, and like for handling state, right? That could be an approach. But in this case, we're going to be using React context, and so we are not going to make use of local storage. And then when we have a refresh token endpoint, like I showed you in the backend, right? And now what's going to be happening with this refresh token endpoint is we're going to add it. We're going to put it in like the context folder, and it's going to be calling every time the application mounts. So whenever the user refreshes the browser or goes to a new route, all of that, right? A new access token is going to be generated using the refresh token endpoint, using the refresh token endpoint. So we're going to be implementing that, and also we're going to be implementing we're also going to be implementing 2FA setup, right? We're going to be implementing 2FA setup. Sorry, I want to move this code from here. Yeah, so we're going to be implementing all of that in this project. Now, if you look at the current project, we've done some scaffolding. So if you go to the app folder, you'll notice there's quite a lot of things in this project. And yeah, basically, I created all the pages, right? So we have the sign up page, which is just a form. And yeah, I created like state. So all of these basic things, but we're not yet handling anything, right? So we have all of this here. Even in the login form, similar, we have the forms and we have the states. And then in the forgot password, we have the form. And so basically, when a user signs up, then the login, or when a user logs in. So we're going to have two different flows for login. But first, we're just going to go basic. So user types in the username and then password, and then we send it through the API endpoint. And then based on the results, we redirect the user either to the home page, where we show to the home page where we just show little details about the user, just the name of the user. We're going to update this file, and then here we have two buttons. You can go to the settings page or you can log out. Yeah, so when the user comes here, the settings page enables them to implement two-factor authentication, right? So that's basically what we're doing in the settings page. So if two-factor is already enabled, then the only thing they can do is to disable 2FA, right? But if it's not yet enabled, then they can enable 2FA, and by enabling 2FA, what happens is that a QR code is generated which they can scan using maybe the Google Authenticator app, and then they can enter the 6-digit token, and then if it is valid against like the secret generated from the QR code, if you saw the Node.js video, you see how that works, right? Then 2FA would be enabled for this particular user, and the login flow for this user changes. Now, when the user comes to the login page after they've typed in their username and password, now it's going to check if 2FA is enabled. Now, if 2FA is enabled, then the user would be redirected to a 2FA page where they can enter the 6-digit token. And then when they enter this token, if it is valid, then the user is now going to be able to, maybe they're going to be redirected to the home page where we can get the details of the user, because at login, the access token is going to be generated. Now, this access token that is generated on this page is going to be passed to the context folder, which we're going to be creating. Now, enough of all of that, right? Another thing which has been set up in this project is what we call proxy route, right? Proxy route. So remember, our backend is on a Node.js project. It runs on a localhost 5002 endpoint, and then our project, which is the front-end project, runs on a port 3001, right? So these are two different endpoints, and this could expose you to cross-origin. Yeah, so this is like a cross-origin request because it's not coming from the same endpoint. Yeah, and now also now when the backend sets the so the truth, the best way to implement all of this is to make use of the API route, which Next.js makes it very easy for us to set up API routes, right? Now using this API route, then there will be no cause issue, right? And then we can be able to pass cookies using like credentials, right? We're going to be able to pass cookies and all of those, right? So since the API is now going to live within the route of like the front end application, so they share the same origin, going to avoid cause entirely and all of that, right? So like I said, I've been able to set up this proxy route. So it's just like quoting the API endpoints which we created in Node.js, right? So we have the login, for example, we have the route. So this means for us to access this login route, we're able to go, we need to go to API/auth/login, right? Now in this login route is basically talking to the login endpoint, yeah, and it's a post request. So just basic fetch API request is happening here. And then what's another thing that is happening here is we're including credentials. So this helps us get cookies. Now when we get these cookies, looking at this code here, we're getting the cookies and then we're now passing it to the browser. We're injecting this into the browser because getting the cookie is not enough, because this cookie is being set on the backend. So we need to be able to get this cookie and pass it to the browser and set the cookie on the browser. So that's what's happening here, right? And then, yeah, we are getting next request, next response. So this helps us respond. Yeah, this is the request that is coming in, and then like the route and all. So when we implement like this fetch request, then the response is then sent, and this can be accessed within our application. So I have like this proxy route for all the routes that we created on the backend. We have the refresh token, we have the reset password, we have the sign up, yeah, and they're just basically alike, right? And same thing for the settings, right? So you can set up 2FA. And yeah, all of that is happening on this code. Yeah, so I'm going to make sure I push this code to GitHub so that like anybody that needs to access it. And another thing I did is I created a lib function API. So in our project, we would need to like be interacting with the APIs created here, so that we don't have to like be calling the fetch API. So I could have also used this here, but like I didn't. So I created a lib function and an API.ts file. So what's doing this, we're just going to be passing the path to this API function. We're just going to pass in the path and options now. So the options are just going to be spread here, while the options, the headers, are going to be spread here. And so we'll be able to make API requests without having to call fetch API on several different files. So that is why we have this utility function here. We can proceed to create our context file. Yeah, so we're going to be creating an auth.context.tsx file. So this is like a shared context for our authentication states. So this will let us access the user's access token from any part of our application. So in the root of our project, yeah, you can also like create this file in your lib folder, right? But I'm just going to create a context folder. Oh, sorry, this is a file. I meant to create a folder, so context, right? And then we'll create an auth.context.tsx file. Now in this file is going to be a client component because we need to make use of React hooks like the use state hook, use effect, and co. So we're going to import all those hooks that we're going to be making use of, and we're also going to be making use of the create context and use context hooks also. I don't know if create context is a hook. Yeah, we're going to be making use of all these hooks, so we're importing these hooks. And then in this file, we're going to be making API requests. So like I said, it's going to help us access the access token, a refresh function, logout function across various files in our project. So it's going to be like a global state, right? So but first, before we do that, let's create the context file. So we're going to create context using this function. We're going to create context, and by default it's going to be undefined. It's going to be undefined. Now, because this is a TypeScript project, right, we need to but before that, let's create like a provider, an auth provider. So this auth provider is going to be imported into the layout file and then used to wrap our project, and that's why we're getting the children. Yeah, so we're getting like every other body of our project, and then like we're placing it here. So if we go to the app folder, to the layout file, we're meant to import the auth provider, right? So I think we can just do that and avoid stress. So import auth provider. Yeah, we're going to import auth provider and wrap it around our project like this. So auth provider this way. Sorry, I've messed the whole code, right? We don't need all of this. And we also don't need all of this, right? So yeah, we're going to wrap it this way, and this way it's going to be able to access this provider that we're creating here, right? And then so the values that we want to access globally across various files is like what we're going to pass here, and then all our pages are going to have access to them. Now, what are these values? So we're going to create an interface here, and yeah, so just this type, and then we're going to pass this type here, and we're going to pass it here. So it's either this or undefined, right? So now what's this? So access token, this is like our in-memory token for making authenticated requests. So we're going to store in it like in the memory. Then we're also going to be able to set this access token whenever a user logs in, or whenever like the refresh token is called and all, right? And then we're going to be able to this logout is very important, so that we can be able to call this logout function from anywhere in our project. For example, in the home page here, which I showed earlier, we are going to want to be able to call this function. If this button is clicked, we want to call the function. So yeah, you can take it out of the context file, but like, yeah, let's just put it here, and then we just want a loading state, which helps us know if we are still checking authentication on first load or when the page refreshes and all like that. Yeah, so in the auth provider, we're going to create some states, right? So we're going to create states to manage the access token, to manage loading, and then if a user logs out, we want to redirect them, say maybe to the login page and all. So we definitely need use router from next navigation. Now with that, we would need to initialize that. So that's all we're doing here. So we're creating state for access token for loading state, and we're initializing the use router hook. So now let's create like a helper function that calls our backend to try and refresh the token. So if the backend refresh token cookie is valid, so if there is so in a situation where a user is already logged in, so there is a refresh token in the cookie, right? So we want to create a refresh function, sort of like an helper function. Now what this function does is that it calls this API route, right? That's the API refresh token. It calls this and helps us, like refreshes. So it takes the refresh token. So okay, let me show you the route, right? So basically what's happening is it takes the cookie, takes the refresh token cookie. So if I pull the backend code, if we go to the auth controller, so there is a refresh token endpoint. Sorry, that is not the endpoint. So yeah, there's a refresh token endpoint, and what this endpoint is doing is that it's pulling the refresh token from the cookies, and then it's passing it to the service file. So what the service file is doing is that it's verifying the token if the token is valid, and if the token is valid, it's generating a new access token using the refresh token. So that's just all that is happening here. So we want to generate a new access token using the refresh token, and that's why we have this refresh function. Now this refresh function is going to be wrapped in a use effect block, so that it calls anytime the application mounts. So when the application mounts, so it could be when the application is reloaded. So if the application is reloaded and we have a refresh token, so automatically we want to create a new access token, right? Now you notice like it's throwing an error for this API. Remember, we created a utility API function here. So we need to import the function in our application. So we need to import API. We need to import API. And this way we have access to this API. And now one thing that is happening here is that we're calling this endpoint, and then when we call this endpoint, it returns the access token. So that's that as access token, and then we're setting it into the access token. So so that like access token is available all through our project. Remember, this is in the login code also, we're also going to be able to set access token. So that is why we are like passing this access token. So the next thing, we would need to like create a function for logout too. So just similar to what we are doing for refresh. So we can really take this out of here. I'm just doing it here. So we have logout. So logout is calling the logout endpoint, which is a post request, and basically it is setting the access token to null, and definitely in the background is also removing the refresh token. And then this is why we imported router. So we're now going to navigate the user to login. So when the user logs out any page, like then it takes them to the login. So now with all of this, we can now pass it as values, which will always be available all through our project, and that is why we created this interface. So we now have this as this is now going to be accessible all through our project. Now the next thing that we need to do is to export like a use auth hook. So instead of having to call this use context hook everywhere in our project where we want to like make it, we can just have like a function, something like this, which is like wrapping this use context. So instead of having to call this all through our project, so we just expose this use auth. This helps us to use this context that we just created. Now with this, we have like created the context file, which is quite massive, but like it's going to be useful throughout our whole project. Yeah, so the next thing we're going to be implementing in this project is the login. So now that we have the context set up, now we want to work on the login form. So we are getting the email and the password, and we're going to be sending it to the login route, which we already created. And then we're going to be storing the access token in context. So like React, like let's call that like our memory, and then we're going to redirect the user to the home page. We're going to do that now. So in the login file, first thing first, we need to import API, because we're going to be making API Yeah, we're going to be making an API request. We need that. Secondly, we need to import the context file, so that we can be able to set the access token. So we need to import use auth. So if we did not set use auth, we would have needed to import use context, and we would also need to import use auth provider, and then like come and do all of those logic here. But since we already did all of that, so and then next thing we're going to import is use router, because we are going to redirect the user from the login page to like the home page. So after importing all of this, then the next thing is we have the email, which is connected to the email field. We have the password, and then we have errors, which is going to throw error in case like there's any error along the line. Now we have to get from user to the context file. The only thing we need in this file is to be able to set access token. So we can just destructure that from what is being returned, and we can also initialize router. Now when all of this is done, then the next thing is for us in this undo function. So when this form is submitted, we're calling this undo login function, right? And the first thing is we're preventing default behaviors, we're setting errors to empty. So with these, now the next thing will be for us to let's create a try and cache block. Now in this try and cache block, we are now going to, I'm just going to paste the code here, right? So in this try and cache block, what we're doing is that we're talking to the login proxy endpoint. We're sending a post request and we're passing so this is the second parameter, which is we're sending the method and the body alongside the various data, and then we're setting the access token. So remember, we're not yet implementing 2F. So straight up when we log in, if this works out, if this like comes out true, then we're going to get the access token, which we're passing to the context file to make it globally available in our project. And then we're redirecting the user to the home endpoint, not the dashboard route. So we're redirecting them to the home route. So, and then we're setting errors. So with that, the form is supposed to work. It's going to store. We're going to have access to cookies and refresh token. So, I'm just going to go to the code. So this is nothing is working here currently. So let me just go to the login route. So on the login route, we have an error. So this says the user auth must be inside auth provider, and this is the error thrown from here, right? And this means we're meant to, I think we wrapped the layout file. We have a children outside. This is wrong, right? So I think with this should fix the error, right? So on the login page, we have the email and password. And then if you inspect the page, and go to the application, you go to cookies, there is nothing here, right? So I have a user, Jendo, gmail.com, and then a password of 654321. It's going to throw an error. Okay, so the refresh token is stored here, which shows that like we have an access token already, right? And then it takes us to the index page. So this tells you that the login is working, right? So the next thing we want to do is on the index page of our application, right? So like I said, in the backend project, I created a new endpoint. So if you come to the auth controller, I created a new function called the get me. Now, get me is like, if you come to the route, created a /me endpoint here. So it's like a shortcut endpoint that helps you get information about a currently authenticated user without needing to pass an ID of sort on or like that, right? So that is what we're trying to do here, right? So here we have this function, and what this function does is that through the token, the access token, it's able to get the user ID, and then passing that user ID to the get current user, it's able to find that particular user in the Prisma database, and then it's able to extract the information we need about that user. For example, we need the name, the email, and we also need to know if two-factor authentication is enabled for that particular user, right? And that is what the /me endpoint is all about. And so we need to make use of that /me endpoint on the page here. So not something that is compulsory, but just so that we know if the user that is logged in is like the correct user. So using the access token, we're going to decrypt that and be able to get the user ID and then pass it through our code. So I'm just going to create like a use effects hook in this page. So first of all, I'm going to import use state. Do we need use state, right? Yeah, I'm going to import. So first of all, this is going to be a client component. Then I'm going to import use state and use effect from React, right? And then we're also going to import use router. So we're going to be making use of, or maybe for now we can just do it with it. Now, since we're going to be making an API request, so we need to import the API utility function we created earlier. Now, another thing we need to import is use auth. The use auth hook, which we created ourselves. Now, this use auth hook, we are going to be using it to get the access token. Remember, we need the access token. And this access token, since the user is logged in, is now made available across all the pages of our application. We are just going to like the structure to get the access token from user. Now let's also create a state for the name of the user. So let's just say name and set name. Yeah, it's going to be a string. And then with this, we can now create like a use effect hook. Now what this use effect hook is going to do is that if there is an access token on this particular page, there's an access token on this particular page. Why do we have an error? Access token is declared, but it's red. Its value is never red, right? Yeah, so we're gonna get there, right? So the access token, so we have a use effect hook, and then what's happening is we're creating a function, and then we're calling the /me endpoint, and then we're passing the access token because this is a protected route. So I'm going to bring back the backend, and then if we go to the route, so you notice that it requires authentication. So this is a protected route that needs the access token, yeah, for you to run it. And then when we do this, so we're going to be able to get the user details. And then we can get like the name, right? And then, yeah, so if there is an access token, we're now going to run this function, and then we're adding it as a dependency here. This is throwing an error access token, and here is saying, oh, I think there's a typo error, right? So this fixes all of that. So yeah, the use effect hook. So we need to, since we have the name, we can just update this to say welcome name, right? So there's no need to add like guest here because this page is never going to load except the user is logged in. So yeah, we're able to now get the details about the user, and then I'm going to come back to making this route protected. But let's go back to application, and then now we can see Jendo. Welcome Jendo, because now, and you'll notice that when I refresh the browser, we're still going to get the user, because when I refresh the browser, we're calling the refresh token endpoint, and then we're getting new access token, so the user still stays logged in. But after 15 minutes, the user is going to be logged out. So when you try to like perform requests without maybe like refreshing or something, the user access token has expired. So yeah, you can develop other like solutions to that, right? Yeah, so this is that. So I think the next thing we should work on is being able to log out the user, and we have almost implemented this, because in the context in the context file, we have access to a logout function. So in this page, all we just need to do is to get the logout function and then attach it to the logout method here. So I'm just going to like pull this to a new file and have like an onClick. And onClick that calls the logout method. So now we'll be able to like log out the user. So let me inspect and then go to application so you can like track it. So you see the refresh token there. So when I click on logout, the refresh token is gone and then like the user is logged out. So that is we've been able to implement login and logout for our application. Now another thing I want us to quickly implement is for example, now I can just go to the home route and then I'm able to see the dashboard even though no user is logged in, because that is why we cannot get a name. So on this page we should be able to, so using the access token, and I think we have a loading state. In the situation, if we just use the access token, so in a situation where it takes time to fetch the access token, so it's just going to tell us that there is no user, like, you understand? So that is why we have the loading state. So I'm just going to still get the loading state from here. So then I'm going to have like another use effect. So whenever this page is called, so this is just us trying to protect this page, right? So we are just saying that okay, so we're saying whenever this page is called, we want to check if loading is not true, and if there is no access token, right, then we want to redirect the user to the login page, because the user is not yet logged in and so they should not be able to access this page, right? So we need to import use router and then we need to initialize it here, and then it's going to fix all that error. So now in our application, now we can no longer just access the main route. It's going to okay. So now there is like a in the process of loading, just before it confirms, like we are seeing the route, and we don't want a situation like that. So normally you could have like a loading button. So we just have like an if statement somewhere here that is just going to be checking if the page is still loading and there's no access, or there's no access token, like the page should be blank. But in a situation where you have like a spinner, you can just like set up a spinner. So with this, now when we go to that page, we're not going to see the page at all. So you see, it's just going to be like a blank page, and then it's going to like take us to the login page. So we've been able to implement the login route, the logout route, and we've been able to like see how to protect the route, right? So we're going to move like quite faster now. The next thing we would implement is a sign up page, so that we can be able to like sign up a user from our application. There is a sign up form. Yeah, so we have the sign up form. So we want to make it functional. So very similar to the login route, we have use state here, which is like controlling all of this state. So we have the and we have a function to handle sign up. We have the name, the email, and the password button. So now we're tracking the name, the email, and the password here, and then we also have an error state. So the way our sign up works is that once a user is signed up, we are getting a access token. So a user does not need to sign up and then log in before they get an access token. So the moment they sign up, they get an access token. We want to get this set access token function from the context, so that when the user signs up, we want to set the access token so that we have an access token and we can be able to access protected route. We can be able to like proceed with our application. So we're going to import API for us to like make API calls across our project. We're going to import Auth for us to be able to access the context file, and then we're also going to import use router, because after the user is signed up, we want to redirect them to like the home page where it's like the dashboard of our application. So with all of that set up, I would want to initialize want to get set access token from useAuth. I want to initialize route. Now in the handle sign up function, we want to call, so we're going to have a try and cache block there, and then in the try and cache block, so just very similar to the login, what we're doing is we're passing the options and the path, right? So this is the path because we have like the endpoints created in the API folder, which is like the proxy route, and then we're passing the name, email, and password to that route. And then if it is like, if it returns the access token, we're setting the access token to the access token state, which is now going to be passed to the context and made available through our application. And if this is done, we're redirecting the user to like the dashboard page, which is our home route. So that is what is happening on this page. So now we can be able to sign up a user to our application, and this works. One thing I'm going to do before I set up is I'm going to like spin up the Prisma Studio, npx Prisma Studio. So we can be able to track a user that is signed up. So currently we have two users. We have the Jane Doe and the John Doe. So I'm going to take this away from here, and then we're going to sign up a new user. So let's sign up Joe, and let's sign up Joe at gmail.com. And then for password, we're going to say hello Joe. And then we're going to sign up the user. And so you see it signs up, because why we're able to see Joe straight up is because we have an access token, and then it can be able to verify the user. And now when we come to Prisma and we refresh, we're going to see the new user. So this tells us that our sign up route is working. Now another thing that we would want to implement is a situation whereby when a user is signed in, we don't want them to be able to access the login route and the sign up route. For example, this user is logged in already. They should not be able to access the login page because the user is already signed in, and they should also not be able to assign the sign up part, and then vice versa, right? When the user is not signed in, they should not be able to access the home route. So we kind of undid this already. We can make use of middleware in Next.js. Now this can be quite tricky because the Next.js middleware runs on the server. That's before routing happens. So it's very great for redirecting, rewriting, but like the truth is your middleware does not have access to local storage. It does not have access to React context, right? But definitely it has access to it has access to your cookies. So we can apparently not be able to like validate using the access token, but we can validate using the refresh token. So we can be able to like check if there's a refresh token, then do all of this, right? If there's a refresh token, so we're assuming that if there's a refresh token, the user is signed it. So you could also like come up with a better approach, or basically don't make use of middleware at all. Maybe just have your, but like so we're going to like set up a middleware, and let's create the middleware.ts file. So middleware.ts file. So like I said, so basically what we're doing in this file is we're getting the refresh token from cookies. Your middleware has access to your cookies. Your middleware can also have access to like your header file, to your headers, like the request headers, access to like the request URL, all of those things, right? So using the refresh token, and then we're like checking for like the path. So so we're saying if the path equals to login or sign up, then we're redirecting the user to like the home route, which is like our dashboard. Now if the route is like this, or maybe any protected route, but like I'll say we really don't need this here, but like if it is this, then we're redirecting the user to like the login page. So that is what is happening here, and then we're just configuring the routes here like to trigger the middleware. So if any of this route happens, we're going to like trigger the middleware before like the route loads. So that's like what's happening here now. So with this middleware in place, if we go to /login as a logged in user, would not be able to load the login page, would be redirected back here. And same goes for sign up, right? Same goes for sign up. We'll be right back to our dashboard now. So now that we've implemented the middleware, we've implemented login, logout, sign up, I think the next thing we should work on is the two-factor authentication, which is like a hot thing, like anybody would want to implement in their project. You need to understand the logic. So the logic, the way we wrote the backend code is that when a user logs in, so if two-factor authentication is enabled for a particular user, now the login flow changes, because when the user logs in, we take the email and the password. Now we check it against the database. Now if all of this is valid, then we check if 2FA is enabled. Now if 2FA is enabled, that means we have a temporary token. I think we have a temporary token. So if 2FA is enabled, so that means like the user has been able to like set up the authenticator application or so, then you have like a 6-digit token. So the user is redirected to like a 2FA page, that is like this page here. We should have a 2FA page right here, this page. So the user is redirected to this 2FA page where they impute the token, that's the 6-digit token. And then when they impute this token, which is like the one-time password, OTP, right, then we verify the token. We verify it, and then if it is valid, then we generate the access token and the refresh token. So but the first thing we need to work on is, now what's the implementation? How does the user enable two-factor authentication? Because if you look at these users that we have created so far, we see that two-factor is not enabled for these users, right? So how can it be enabled for these users? Now in the settings page, in this settings page, it is expected. Now let me show you what the settings page looks like, right? Now in this settings page, it's expected for user to come here, click on this enable 2FA button. Now when the user clicks on the enable 2FA button, what happens is that a QR code is generated. And I think as the QR code is generated, if the user uses their authenticator app to scan the QR code, and this generates a 6-digit token every minute, I guess. So this token is now going to be entered into this field for us to verify that, for us to perfectly enable like two-factor authentication, right? So the fact that this is generated does not mean two-factor authentication is set up for that particular user until the user has entered the token. And then when they enter the token, so a secret is normally generated when the QR code is generated, when like the user, like the authenticator app scans, right? So we are going to verify against that secret, and if everything works out well, then we're going to update the database that two-factor authentication has been enabled for that particular user. We're going to set the secret also in the database, and so whenever this is now going to like alter the login flow. When the user logs in, they need to always enter that 6-digit token, like the new OTP that is generated, and then we're going to verify it against the secret that is stored in the database, and then before the user is going to be able to access an access token and a refresh token. So we're going to do that now. So we have this already set up. So we're going to create a couple of states. Okay, we have the two-factor enabled, QR code, setup token, message, loading, setup. So for us to generate this token, we need the user ID. For us to access the user ID, then we need to like access the /me endpoint, right? So it's on the me endpoint we're going to get the user ID, and for us to access the /me endpoint, that is like a protected route. So we need the access token from Auth, right? We need from Auth, and then in Auth we are now going to be able to get the access token and say the constant. Access token. I think we would also need the loading state. Yeah, so the access token, and now when we get the access token, I think we would also need to like redirect the user from this page to the page where they enter the token. So we need use router. So let me just initialize it here. We need use router, and then we're going to be making API requests. Yep, we're going to be making API requests, so we need API here. Now in our project we can now like proceed. So we're going to be making use of use effects, because we want a situation that when the user lands on this page, right, and then there is an access token, we want to fetch the user details. So I'm just going to update this to add the use effect, and then we're going to create a use effect that functions whenever there's an access token. Now when the user lands on this page and there's an access token, what's going to happen? We're going to interact with the /me endpoint, and then we're going to pass the access token, and then we're going to be able to set so we are now going to be able to set two-factor thing. So currently two-factor enabled is going to be, by default, is going to be false, so we're going to set it to this that we created here. Then the next thing is this happens by default. So when the user clicks on the enable 2FA button, we would want to call a function. So when the user clicks on the enable 2FA, we want to start the setup process for 2FA authentication, right, by calling the setup endpoint. So I'm just going to create like a function start setup. Now what this is going to do is going to call the 2FA /setup endpoint, and yeah, we're just setting so, and then we're going to pass the token, because all of these are protected routes. Then this is now going to return the QR code. Now when it returns this QR code, we're setting it to the state, and then this is like a condition where, like, okay, if QR code is available, then we're going to show the image and then this input field, right? Now with these two FA enabled, so okay, let me go to the button here where they get to like enable it, right, and then we can be like on click start setup. Now the next thing is when they start the setup and then the image is the QR code is generated, the input. So we have on that button here for after they've scanned the authenticator, after the user has scanned the authenticator and then they've gotten the token and they've imputed the token in this field, they would want to verify and enable 2FA. And remember, we have an endpoint for that. The next function we're going to like create is for us to be able to do the whole verification. Just create like a function that does verification, so it's sent a request to the verify setup endpoint, and then like still yet it passes the access token, and then we're passing the token, like this token, we're passing the token through the request, and then if this goes through and like everything is like successful, right, that means 2FA is set up, and then we're going to be able to change the set 2FA enabled to true and all of that, right? And but if all of this does not go through, that means like the token is invalid. You can call this on this function, say an on click to verify setup. Now with this, the last thing we need to do is now, so if we go back to the code on the settings page, so I'm just going to refresh. So let me go back to the user dashboard to be sure the user is still logged in. So I'll go to settings page, okay, so looks like that button is not linked, so I'm going to come here and okay, so this is a button, not a link. So on this page, okay, we have router. I would have preferred to convert this to a link, but let's avoid having to import link again. So I can just do on click router.push, take us to the settings route. So that's like a cool workaround. So this takes us to the settings route, and then here we can enable 2FA, and then it generates this. So I have like this stuff here. So I think I want to delete them, right? Yep, so I'm going to delete this too, and then now I can scan. Oh my god, Yeah, so I can scan the QR code. It gets added. It gives me a code which I can copy and use here and be able to verify that. So yeah, 2FA is now enabled for this particular user. So when we come to the database, we can now see that 2FA is enabled for this user. Right now, we also need to be able to disable 2FA. So yeah, we need to be able to disable 2FA. So in a situation, so that's like the first option. That's like the first option we see on the settings page. In case you want to disable 2FA. So we also have a route for that, right? So I'm just going to still create like a function for disable 2FA. And similar to others, we're calling the disable endpoint, we're passing the access token, and then we're setting 2FA to false. And yeah, so that is just that. And then on the button, we're going to have an on click, and yeah, that is that about that, right? And all of this is now set up, so we can go back to here and click on disable 2FA. And yeah, when we come back to the database and reload, 2FA is already disabled for that user, right? And you can go ahead to enable 2FA again for the user. Now, like I said, this affects the login flow for this particular user. Now, the way the login works previously is that we're just checking the email and the password, and then we're like signing in the user. But this is going to change just slightly. So basically, we are going to be checking the database. We need to okay, so in the backend code, right, in the login route, so we have like this if statement that says if requires 2FA, we're returning requires 2FA as true, blah 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 blah, right? So now when a user logs in and then it checks if this, so we have access to this requires 2FA as true, right? So we can come into our login project and say something like if requires 2FA. So here we no longer need to like set it like this. So immediately after we have sent a request to the login route, right? So we want to have an if statement that checks if requires 2FA is true. So if requires 2FA is true, we are storing just this temporary token to the local storage. Now this just takes a very short time, right? And then we're pushing the user to the 2FA page. Now in the 2FA page, we're going to verify this token. I think I should just show you the backend, right? The backend code. So we have like a temp token. So remember in the middleware we have like a different middleware for temporary token. So we are protecting the 2FA endpoint, but we're not protecting it with the auth route, right? Because the user is not yet logged in, right? So we are creating like a temporary token which we are using to like protect that endpoint. So we need to pass that token with the request, and that is like the token that we are getting here. So we are storing it in local storage, so it's just like for a very short time, right? Now, so in the 2FA page, so this is where we are entering the token. So we're just going to in the undo submit. So in the undo submit here, we're just going to have a try and cache block. Now in this try and cache block, so we are sending a request to 2FA login, we're passing the temporary token here, and then with this we'll now be able to get the access token which we are now storing globally, and then we are removing the temporary token because like we're not using it again, and then we're redirecting the user to the home page. So I need to import all of this that we're using. So we need use router, we need API, and we need use auth, and then here we need access token. Yep, we need access token. Now where do we get the temporary token from? Remember, we're getting it from local storage, so we can just like create a use effect hook here, somewhere here, and then we're just going to pull the temporary token from local storage, blah blah blah. So use effect. Yep. And now with okay, I think we also need to initialize router. Yep. And then temporary token, I think we need to set a state for that. Yep. So with all of that, I think we have been able to handle this, right? So now we can, so first of all, let's go to user, let's enable this, and then we get to like scan. Right. Oh, I think it's already enabled for this user. Okay, so first, it's the same project, so I think we just have to delete this, right? And then we have to scan for a new user. Yep. And then we have access to the token, which we can now enter and verify. Yeah, and now that it's verified, let's go to the home page of our application and log out the user. I'm going to log out the user so that we can try deleting your cookies. Yeah, so we got the error too many redirect earlier on. I just had to pass it to ChatGPT, right? And basically it is because of this, which I said was not very important earlier on in our middleware. So what it does is like it sees like the refresh token exists, blah blah blah, like it continues, it's like it leaves us in a loop essentially, right? So what I just had to do was to delete this, right? And then when I go back to the application and I reload, yeah, everything would work normally. So I logged out that user. Sorry, 654321. Oh my god. Okay, so this user is logged in, so I'm just gonna go to settings and then enable 2FA for this user, and then scan it. There's another way of us testing if everything that we've done is working well. So yeah, we're going to scan it. It gives us a code that we can now add in our application. Then when we add this code, 2FA is enabled. So I'm just going to go back to the home page and sign out this particular user so that we can see the new login flow, right? So alright, so now I log in, and now when I log in, it asks us for the 2FA code. This is like the flow that happens when 2FA is enabled for a particular user. Then now we can verify, and then we can now be able to access our dashboard and every other thing. So now we've been able to implement login, logout, sign up, 2FA, and all of that. The last thing we have to implement in this project is the forgot password and reset password. I'm just going to close everything up and then go to the app folder, go to the forgot password page. And now this is not this is like very easy for us to implement. So on the login page, you'll notice like there's a link that takes us to the forgot password page, and all you just have to do is to enter your email address. Now when you enter your email address, so we're just going to have a try and catch block in the handle submit function. And what this is going to do is it's going to be able so we need to import API. Now after importing API, I think we also need to create a state for message, right? Yeah, we need to create a state for message, and I think that yeah, so we're just gonna leave it like that, but I think somewhere we were using the message. Okay, so let me set message to empty initially. Yep, so I'm gonna set message to initially, right? And I think somewhere here we can use the message. Yep, so we can use it here. Yeah, so basically what's happening here is we're sending a request to forgot password endpoint, then we are passing the email address. So what's going to happen is it's going to check against the email address. If we have that email address in our system, it is meant to send an email to that user, to that email address. Then the email address, so that email address is going to include a route to a reset password page alongside a token. So alongside a token that is going to be generated, right? So in our case, we don't have node mailer set up, so I'm just going to like click that link from the log of the server. So now on the reset password page, we're going to take the token from the URL, which is what this search param is doing. We're going to take the token from the URL of the URL, and then when we take the token from the URL, so similarly we are going to have the try and cache block, which is going to validate that token, and then when it validates the token, then the user can now type in a new password, right? So in the background, within few seconds, it's just going to validate the token, and then when it's valid, so you see it's passing in the token and the new password. So yeah, it's going to validate the token, then it's going to like set the new password for that particular user. So we need to import API. We need to also import router, I guess, and then we need to router. Yeah, I think that is like all we need to do, right? Okay, use router is also from use navigation, so we can just attach it here and get rid of this and just make things like look simple. So now with all of this, I think we've implemented that. So I would want to log out this user. So when I log out this user, so here we have the forgot password. When you click on forgot password, you click on, so I forgot the password for draw, so at gmail.com. So right now when we send reset link, now in the server we're going to get like this message, right? So when I click on it, it opens like a new tab, so you can see the token in the URL, right? And then here you can now like enter your new password. So I'm just going to enter a new password, and then when I click on it, the password is updated, and when we come to Prisma, the current password ends at 06, right? So I'm gonna refresh, and then you see like the password has changed. So yeah, basically we've been able to like implement so we can now log in the user. So let me log in. I think that was why it was not working earlier, right? F441. Yeah, I think this user has 2FA enabled. I think this is the user. Yep, and now we have the user logged in. So far in our application, we've been able to implement custom authentication in our Next.js application. And yeah, so in case you don't want to make use of a library or so, or in case like you just want to understand how it works, there's a lot of refinement that needs to go into this project, handling errors properly, and avoiding duplications and making the code clean. But yeah, understanding this kind of logic, you can easily if you fine-tune everything to work out well, you can easily like re-implement in subsequent projects and all like that. So you can take time to like understand how authentication works, how different people implement authentication, read about like how authentication works, and possibly this tutorial would also help you understand how authentication works. And that will be all for this video. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.